ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Shalom Community Choir and Annie Zonneveld for our opening performance.
Thanks for coming, everyone. All right. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. We believe in 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 peace, salam, shalom. Peace in Palestine. Peace, salam, shalom. And Jerusalem. Peace, salam, shalom. And in Syria. Peace, salam, shalom. We believe in peace, salam, shalom. Peace in Mexico. Peace, salam, shalom. And Benghazi. Peace, salam, shalom. And in Africa. Peace, salam, shalom. And Afghanistan. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace in politics. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace in the jailhouse. Peace, salam, shalom. In the schoolroom. Peace, salam, shalom. Everywhere. Peace, salam, shalom. We believe in 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 peace, salam, shalom. Peace in peace, salam, shalom. Everyone sing peace, salam, shalom. We believe in peace, salam, shalom. We believe in peace. We all want peace.
And now, please welcome to the stage co-directors Maliha Khan and Kevin Jennings. Maliha is also the director of MPVDC and a lawyer for the U.S. Department of Commerce. And Kevin Jennings is the president of Tenement Museum in Manhattan. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you everybody for being here today, despite the rainy weather, and welcome to Celebration of Life 2019. As co-chair of MPV's board alongside Kevin, I am thrilled to be here all the way from Washington, D.C. to participate in this transformative event and share with all of you all that MPV has been up to. Before we get started, I would like to thank the sponsors that supported the fruition of this event. Human Rights Campaign, Women's March LA Foundation, Ansari Foundation, Nikohl Sharkasi-Wang, Marilyn Wyatt, Nasreen Haroon, Equality for Her, Kismet Event Design, Mariam Raj Artistry, JJ Suspenders, and Harmony Gold Theater. Also, I would like to thank all of you for your loyalty and support of MPV, without which we could not be here. Thank you very much.
Like Maliha said, your support and your contributions allow MPV to exist. That means all the good work that Ani and her team has done here locally in Los Angeles, in the 7 other cities across the United States where we have chapters, internationally in over 7 countries, and at the United Nations is only possible thanks to your financial contribution. The sustenance and growth of this work is also only possible with your continued financial support. Celebration of Life is MPV's annual fundraising gala. While we're here to have a good time, keep in mind that the greater vision of supporting MPV's mission to advocate for human rights, social justice, and inclusion in the United States and around the world is the real purpose of this evening. This can be done through the donation page at mpvusa.org on your iPhone or Android, at the sales table in the reception area, with our lovely team members like Yasmin, who will be walking around, and or via a bid for the beautiful painting donated for auction by Mariam Raj Artistry, who's with us here tonight. With that being said, feel free to take as many photos and videos as you would like to commemorate the evening. We've seen the power of social media, so let's use it for good. Tag us at MPV USA on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter as you take photos and post on your networks tonight. Also, hashtag celebration of life and celebrate human rights while you're at it. Now let's take a look at what social media and media can result in when used irresponsibly. These are the narratives that MPV is up against.
Yes, go for it. Play it, go ahead. Oh, maybe not.
Jihad is long overdue. Let's go home and wake up, 'cause you and I have much to do. Home and wake up, our jihad is long overdue. Let's go home and wake up, 'cause you and I have much to do.
Now, as we've learned, it's not just social media that's critical to American culture as we know it today, but media overall. One of the roles MPV plays is acting as the counter-narrative to the overplayed negative stereotypes about Muslims. MPV challenges the very notion of these narratives embedded in hatred and fear by advocating for an inclusive and egalitarian Muslim community. As you can imagine, this has not always been met with positivity. It's been difficult getting the word out about MPV, as we're often silenced by right-wing media that is afraid of Muslims, especially progressive ones, and silenced by leftist media that doesn't think that MPV is Muslim enough. However, not all media outlets have been complacent or silent. With that being said, I'd like to welcome a true representation of MPV's values and principles, Ms. Angela Boisvert on behalf of KCET Television. Angela, welcome. Tell us about the Fine Cut of Festival Films, the series that KCET is being honored for today.
So Fine Cut is the best films from students across Southern California, 18 years and up. And we put together this 6-part series of all of our finalists. And we have a panel of judges. There's 4 that are picked as winners, and they'll go to the Cannes Film Festival with the American Pavilion as our partnership. So we get the best of Southern California.
And more specifically, can you tell us about the nominees this year in the film Al-Imam, which won this year's prize for Best Documentary?
So Al-Imam was great. It was not only technically amazing with its story structure and the way it was put together, but it was just a fantastic story overall. And I just want to quote some of the judges. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. So our judges said it was fascinating and a courageous main character. It gave a new perspective. It was a relevant subject, and one of the best quotes is, "The filmmaker makes a political moment highly personal." There's great value in that kind of storytelling.
And can you talk to us about KCET's programming with regards to promoting diverse cultures around the world?
So KCET always strives to find the untold story and the untold character, and we search all of Southern California for people and culture, and that's really making a difference, not only on the local scale, but also nationally and globally. And that's really why Al-Imam was a great fit for Fine Cut and for KCET. And our other programs, we have Tending Nature, which looks at Native peoples all across California. Our show, City Rising, looks at the informal economies, street vendors, farmers in Coachella Valley. And then this year in May, we have our series Artbound coming out with 2 episodes. One is on gospel and the history of it in Los Angeles, as well as a program with the Japanese American National Museum.
Oh, fantastic. Recently, KCET, which is the local television platform here in Southern California, showcased Al-Imam, which is a short documentary about Ani's journey as a female imam, activist, and the president and founder of MPV. This documentary was not only showcased, but as I mentioned, won the Best Documentary Film at the Fine Cut Film Festival. That showcases all of the types of films that KCET produces to exemplify the cultural diversity that is Southern California. And as Angela was mentioning, this actually means the film will go to Cannes this May to be played in front of hundreds of high-profile attendees across the globe. Now, this accomplishment was only made possible thanks to you and your team, Angela. I want to thank you personally because I often have trouble explaining the phenomenon that is Annie Zonneveld and the work of MPV, and this film has made my job as the board co-chair a lot easier. So thank you for making this film possible, and it gives me tremendous pleasure to present you and KCET with this award.
Great, thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maliha Khan back to the stage for a few more words.
Mr. Frej Fenniche is here all the way from Tunisia on behalf of the Alliance of Inclusive Muslims, or AIM, a global network of progressive Muslim organizations. Mr. Fenniche currently serves as a board member of AIM and has dedicated his entire career to human rights from the age of 20, resulting in imprisonment under the dictatorships of Bourguiba and Ben Ali. Mr. Fenniche has served with the United Nations since 1997, most recently as the chief of the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa branch of the UN Office of Human Rights Commissioner, the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. Prior to joining the UN, he served as board member of the Tunisian League for Human Rights, the oldest human rights organization in Africa and the Arab world, and was a founding member and executive director of the Arab Institute for Human Rights. Mr. Fenniche currently serves as the MENA regional representative of No Peace Without Justice. We are proud to have Mr. Fenniche as our friend and confidant. At this time, I'd like to welcome on stage Mr. Fenniche.
Thank you, Maliha. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to attend MPV's 2019 Celebration of Life and to be here today in Los Angeles, this wonderful city I am visiting for the first time in my life. Thank you very much. And let me say that it's not a coincidence that MPV was born here. Such a multicultural, multi-religious, and multi-ethnic city can only attract and host an organization like Muslims for Progressive Values that is as equally multicultural, open, and inclusive. And such an organization based on universal values is lucky to be shared by Annie Zonneveld, herself a vibrant symbol and a product of those values. Mesdames, Messieurs, I have spent nearly 40 years in the service of the United Nations and in the service of many civil society organizations in the area of human rights and peace in Africa, Asia, and the Arab world. And from these years of experiences as a Muslim, I learned that there is no cause as noble to defend as that of human rights, all human rights for all. In my work, I have learned the importance of having an inclusive and non-discriminatory approach. I have also learned that it's not easy to lead this struggle in Muslim-majority countries. This is not because Islam is incompatible with the universal principles of human rights, but rather it is because of the domination of selective and fanatical interpretation of religious texts. Such interpretations have been conveyed for a long time by conservative imams, who I call traders in the name of religion. These imams and people sponsored and supported by anti-democratic governments from the region. And these governments are themselves propped up by Western superpowers led by the US and the UK in particular. It's a pity. This alliance between the three is at the root of the economic, cultural, scientific, and spiritual poverty of the Muslim world. Muslims around the world wonder why America, the leader of the free world, supports such governments, why corrupt governments without popular legitimacy can continue killing their journalists, Jamal Khashoggi, imprisoning their intellectuals, men and women, perpetuating inequalities and discrimination with total impunity and enjoy America's support. However, what gives me hope is that in many of these countries I have met people and groups such as MPV and such courageous women and men as we are honoring today, who carry the ideal of human rights, who fight for freedom, equality, non-discrimination, and peace. For they also rely on the teachings of Islam, teaching based on a progressive interpretation and in essence of this great religion. These individuals and groups are a nightmare for these governments. And one wonders why powerful governments, with all the means of propaganda and repression in their hands, are afraid of these human rights activists or of these small NGOs such as MPV. The answer for me is simple. Freedom of thought, conscience, and religion scares tyrants. Freedom of expression and association scares dictators. Emancipation of women threatens the hegemony of the patriarchy. Ladies and gentlemen, through its field work and lobbying with the United Nations, MPV has established itself as a credible partner of many governments and many UN agencies, including the United Nations Women, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and many others. Its voice is powerful, and its ideas on women's rights, FGM, gender equality, LGBT rights, social justice are increasingly heard and supported at the international level, in particular because it's coming from a Muslim organization. As an example, the creation of Alliance of Inclusive Muslims in October 2017 in Tunisia, which brings together some 20 associations spread over 4 continents and owes its creation largely to MPV, strengthened the camp of those who defend an Islam compatible with universal principles of human rights. These are reasons for you to be proud of MPV, to be inspired by what it has achieved so far thanks to your support, and to be motivated to continue such support. Great revolutions begin with a courageous idea, a sincere word, an act of bravery. The ideas advocated by MPV and many of its programs and actions fit firmly into this category. They transgress the established order to embrace all humanity and to restore to Islam its human and universal dimension, ideas which have been defended by brilliant Muslim thinkers throughout history. Let me finish my statement by quoting Ibn Arabi, a great Muslim thinker, who 8 centuries ago said this about his understanding of Islam and faith. I follow the way of love, and where love's caravan takes its path, there is my religion, my faith. This is what we have to answer when people ask us, what do you mean by progressive values of Islam? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to welcome Annie Zonneveld, founder and president of MPV, to the stage.
Keep the dance beats going. Okay. I love the way of love. I follow the way of love, and where love's caravan takes its path, there is my religion, my faith. Yes, that is what underlines our progressive values. Thank you, Frej, for framing our work in such exquisite terms and for the insightful explanation of our international work. Now that the foundation and motivation behind our work has been beautifully introduced by Mr. Fenniche, I want to share with you all the intimate and darker details of working in human rights. I put on a good smile all the time, but underneath it, it's pretty rough. The harsher reality of what it means to follow the way of love. The sad truth behind working towards a vision of religion as love. For the last 12 years, MPV's work has been rooted in a constructive, loving, and compassionate Islam. We have always envisioned a world where the Muslim world reflects Islam as a source of dignity, justice, compassion, love for all. Who wouldn't want to be behind that, right? Well, as we've learned, the answer is a lot of people. This language, while idealistic, is not only slow-moving, but threatens those that are in power who wish to maintain the power by also maintaining a status quo of oppression of women and girls, of the LGBTQI community, and of religious, racial, and ethnic minorities. As we've heard, these people have money and power that enables them to continue with their oppressive regimes. That one side we're up against. The flip side of the coin, many progressive Western organizations, foundations, and many non-Muslims don't know what to do with MPV. Either we're Islamophobic by calling out bigotry within our community, or we're not Muslim enough, as I'm doing the azan at the Gay Men's Chorus concert last year, or because I don't wear the hijab, or the fact that our work concerns all Americans rather than just the issue of Islamophobia. Or we are too Muslim simply for being Muslim. I'm sure you can imagine how all of these perspectives have been suffocating chokehold. Regardless, MPV is resilient to these adversities. We are now in 8 cities across the United States, and many organizations in many countries have borrowed our principles and our form of advocacy. Yes, our progressive movement is growing. And why? Simply put, because the current status quo of oppression, violence, and inequality is unsustainable. The Muslim population is tired of it. The population is, but not the governments. There's a difference. I know from my own experience that the brand of Islam these governments are pushing is false. If I may share a little bit about myself, I was born and raised Muslim. My parents pushed me just as hard as they pushed my brothers in academics. My dad insisted I go to college in the United States all by myself at 18. Do you know how liberating that was? Don't ask me what I did. My dad was the one who taught me to make my life count for the greater good of society. My upbringing is void of the cultural baggage and oppressive experiences, falsehoods in the name of religion, that I've seen in many women and girls in many Muslim societies struggle with. I am also privileged to be living in California, and it's my duty to use this privilege for human rights work. The restriction of women's and girls' rights in the Muslim societies we work in include the lack of economic opportunities due to lack of education. We must therefore ask ourselves, why are young women not qualified to apply for job opportunities? Oftentimes, the answer is because they don't have the level of education needed. And why don't they? In some societies, the answer is, what's the point? They just need to get married anyway. Imagine yourself a young woman, even you men in here, imagine yourself as a young woman thinking, believing, and asking yourself, how is that my oppressors are my own parents? And in the name of God, why has God given permission to take my happiness away? This makes me angry. The sad part is the parents and the girls themselves believe that they are acting according to the name of Islam, in the name of Islam. They believe this version of Islam is truth because that's the bastardized version much of the Muslim world has been taught or lied to. So how do we fundamentally change the hearts and minds of individual girls, young women, men, parents, and society from this unjust form of Islam? How do we change people's worldview from tribalism to an inclusive worldview? That's why MPV's top program is MPVsBoard, a program in partnership with imams, religious scholars, lay leaders in promoting an egalitarian, inclusive interpretation of Islam. Here in this photo, you see our second batch of Burundian young women ages 18 to 25 graduating from our program, Clubs for She. This program immerses the young women for 3 days and 4 nights in an overnight camp. Now imagine, in a conservative societies where young women are required to be home by sundown, to have them at an overnight camp is an accomplishment in itself. Yeah? At Clubs for She, we educate young women with the spirit of volunteerism. Yeah. We give them the chance to play. Yes, they have been deprived of that too, because God forbid should they tear their hymens. We teach them of their, I'm just being frank, we teach them of their rights as dictated by the Quran, the right to decide who and when they marry, the right to education, to work outside the home, for reproductive rights, and Islamic human rights language to protect themselves from gender-based violence. Yes, we teach them to turn religious language against the oppressors. And now that we've taught women their rights, we took it to the next level by putting them through an entrepreneurial training program. In 2018, with the support of the U.S. Embassy in Burundi, yes, the U.S. government can do some good things too. I know some of you have some problems with that. But the embassy in Burundi, in partnership with Imam Khalfan, our longtime partner, trained 700 women. These 700 women were placed into groups where they were then given seed money to develop their own small businesses. That's empowerment. Our Imams for She program is broad and designed in partnership with local partners. This is really, really key. And it includes a weekly radio show in Burundi that reaches 9.2 million people, educational forums with progressive scholars of Islam in Tunis, workshops in rural and radicalized area of Tunisia, and grooming future leaders in Burundi. A forum with Indonesian and Malaysian scholars of Islam on the issue of marital rape concluded with an opinion paper of fatwa against marital rape. When Mr. Fenniche mentioned how these oppressive leaders and governments are afraid of MPV and the similar focused organizations we partner with, it's because at the United Nations we completely undermine their religious justification with our work, the theological evidence to support it. We are being invited to the panels and strategy sessions that they have dominated for decades. We are competing against their ideas, and our mere presence scares the hell out of them. Because we are shining the spotlight onto their darkness. After 12 years, our work and message have been consistent, relentless, and finally respected. We are now commissioned to develop and implement a workshop curriculum for the purpose of overhauling hateful educational systems, specifically in the Muslim world, which has officially been approved and will be rolled out in the next few years by the United Nations Office to Prevent Genocide and the Responsibility to Protect. Most recently, our work has resulted in a partnership on a project that I'm very, very, very excited to announce. MPV is now an official partner of UN Women's new initiative, Equality for Law and Law for Women and Girls by 2030. This is a huge accomplishment for a nonprofit that only has two full-time staff and one part-time employee, okay? Now, these atrocities towards women and girls aren't just happening in the developing world or just by or to Muslims. It's happening here in America too. Let's bring it home now, okay? Here in progressive California, the legal marriage age is only 16 with parental consent. So if you get the right judge, they can choose not to ask or even look at the bride to see how old she actually is, or to ask, is this marriage out of your own free will? And these 14-year-old girls were not being married off to 14-year-old boys. No, they're being married to older men. And sometimes it is a case of rape and pregnancy. And just like in some part of the Muslim world, the victim is forced to marry the rapist. It is shocking, isn't it? Forced and child marriages is happening in conservative communities across all faiths, right here in the United States. While MPV argues for religious freedom in the Muslim world, particularly at the United Nations, here in America and in the last 2 years, we have seen a surge in the abuse of the term religious freedom, quote unquote. In the US Religious Freedom Reformation Act, or I'm going to put it in acronyms, RFRA, a law that was intended to protect religious minority rights in America has instead been used to prop up discriminatory practices in the name of religion of faith majority, that is, of some Christians. Of course, some conservative Muslims are also learning to use the same trick, right? They always kind of play off each other. In a female genital mutilation or cutting case, or FGMC, a case against a Shia Borja minority group in Detroit, the community hired attorney Alan Dershowitz to advise them in the use of RFRA in defense of FGMC. RFRA was also utilized in defense of a baker who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. Some companies use RFRA to exempt themselves from providing health insurance coverage of the pill to its female employees. And of course, it's the LGBT and especially trans rights that have undermined in the most unjust manner. It is very interesting how religion is invoked for oppressive purposes rather than lifting people up. This is unacceptable. What is the difference between those in the Muslim world who codify man-made laws in the name of religion and those that we are experiencing here in the US at both the state and federal level? A particular brand of Christianity, if you will. That, ladies and gentlemen, is theocracy. That runs blatantly counter to our constitutional right to the separation of religion and state. As you can see, religious freedom can be just a cover for theocracy. This is a global problem. Here in America, we look forward to continuing our collaboration with like-minded partner organizations, especially with Women's March Los Angeles Foundation, and towards tightening our partnership on the issue of FGMC laws and raising the marriage of children to 18. Collectively, regardless of faith or non-faith, we must work together to uphold the separation of religion and state for the well-being of everyone. So, no matter how tight the chokehold is, we resist, we persevere, because the positive results are too important to give up on. Thank you again for being here today. I really, really am very grateful. Your support means so much to me and our partner organizations, and every dollar you gift contribute to fostering an egalitarian, just, and inclusive world for all. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce MPV's official ambassador, a tireless activist for equality and justice, Blair Imani, who is here to share a few words with you today. Welcome, Blair. Blair was the founder of Equality for Her, the author of Modern Her Story, a longtime activist and a dear friend. Welcome to the MPV family, Blair.
Like MPV, I'm also born in Los Angeles, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much, Ani, for embracing me and bringing me into the MPV family. I first converted to Islam in 2015. And I had the fortune of learning about it in my own path instead of through some patriarchal force. The Islam that I fell in love with did not allow racism. It was unconcerned with image and ego. The Allah I came to know did not view LGBTQ identity as a sin. After I converted, I tried to sell my mom on the brand of Islam that I had grown to love. An Islam original, which was feminist, racially diverse, and affirming to people who embody difference. Yet, I was confronted by her perception of a fearsome patriarchal and homophobic religion, one I knew to be the result of social bias and not of religious doctrine. I did not come into conflict with who I was as a Muslim until the Pulse shooting tragedy of 2016. On that day, gun violence coupled with toxic masculinity extinguished the lives of 49 people. The day after was my very first day at my new corporate job. We had an all-staff meeting to heal and mourn the horrific tragedy that had taken place. And if you recall, the media narrative that spiraled out of control in the hours after the gunman was named became, a homophobic and radicalized Muslim hell-bent on punishing Black and brown LGBTQ people in the community has murdered people in Orlando, more at 11. Yet here I was, simultaneously Black, Muslim, and queer. Where did I fit into this us versus them narrative? Suddenly I felt like I had to hide who I was. I was already dating a man, so why not just closet myself and resume life as an advocate of Black and Muslim issues alone? So that's what I did, and for far too long. That is until one day in 2017 when I had the opportunity to go on national television and make a case for a new type of community intervention. Instead of mass surveillance and marginalization, I was prepared to speak about the creation of community spaces, or safe spaces, if you will. Spaces that would allow for community dialogue and healing instead of alienation and further radicalization. It was perhaps naive of me to think that I could successfully make my case for safe spaces when the national television program I had been invited to go on was Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News. Oh, man. You can Google it. It's great. As I gave examples of communities that needed safe spaces, I spoke about Muslims, Black people, and LGBTQ people. Tucker, aiming to keep me on topic, said I was not there to speak on behalf of Black people or LGBTQ people. Correcting him, I said, well, in addition to being a Muslim, I am also a Black queer person. His jaw hung open in shock. Thank you. And I had just come out on national television as my whole self. It was in that, thank you. It was in that moment and in the days after that I had a fall from grace from the Muslim community. For some, I had suddenly changed from a righteous and desirable Black Muslim activist to a sinner. I was actually uninvited from events, and people within the Muslim community told me they could no longer associate with me. Others kept me at arm's length, but the relationships had changed. I experienced death threats, and I had to move to stay safe. But more importantly, I was able to reach an entirely new community of LGBTQ Muslims and queer people of faith who had been searching for a mirror to themselves for far too long. I connected with everyday LGBTQ people living in oppressive places like Mississippi, Arkansas, Indonesia, and Egypt. I felt a sense of purpose like I never had before, and I felt ashamed that I had allowed society to place me into a closet. I want to be a force for change, and I want to do that without compromising who I am or what I believe. Nearly 2 years after my big coming out debut, I'm still reminding myself that liking yourself and being yourself is far more important than being popular, especially when who you are is perfectly okay and absolutely not haram. I am honored to be joining forces with Muslims for Progressive Values, an organization that since 2007 has always been here for Muslims who do not fit into this cookie-cutter image that our ummah has created. You can be you. You can live your truth. And yes, you can do these things while being Muslim. I'm proof. And now, I'm overjoyed to introduce my friend, a fellow activist, and poet, Bayadir Mohamed-Osman, who will be reading as Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, Sudanese reformer, and performing an original piece, Secondhand Smoke. Thank you.
My name is Mahmoud Muhammad Taha. This is my story. I was born in Rafah, Sudan, a small town on the majestic east bank of the Blue Nile. My mother died when I was only 6 years old, and my father moved us to a neighboring village where we all farmed for a living. By age 11, my father had passed, and my 3 siblings and I were being raised by my uncle. After my graduation from the University of Khartoum, my political activism was instantly controversial. I was dissatisfied with educated elites leading the movement. Their submission to traditional religious and colonial leaders was unacceptable. The willingness to accept the patronage of colonial powers was far too compromising to their commitment to the full independence of Sudan. Thus, I helped establish the Republican Party, where a group of us openly called for an independent Sudan, which quickly led to my imprisonment within 1 year of organizing. The Radfar revolt against the British led to 2 years of solitary confinement, where I further enhanced my relationship with Allah through worship, only to discover the way forward through promoting the true values of Islam. This was the beginning of a spiritual awakening and brought me to a greater purpose. Upon my release, I went into a lengthy self-imposed seclusion and emerged within a clearer and deeper understanding of Islam. This awakening motivated me to shift the Republican Party's focus from an essentially political to an essentially Islamic movement with political dimensions and interests. This was the birth of the Republican Brotherhood. This path was even more dangerous. As I spread knowledge about my understanding of Islam above and beyond Islamic law, I was explicit that any attempt to implement laws derived from traditional Islamic Sharia was a distortion of what Islam called for and a threat to the livelihood of our nation. Sudan needed and still needs a constitutionally established democratic and socialist republic. We focus on propagating our proposals for peaceful social, political, and religious reform. Unfortunately, many powerful people opposed these values, and so it was not that surprising there was a united effort to not only continue to silence me, but to accuse me of rida, or apostasy, claiming I had abandoned and renounced Islam, punishable by death. In the early 80s, many in our movement were put into detention due to our critique of the government's failure to check the fundamentalist incitement of religious hatred and violence. We were cynically released without charge 19 months later, following President Nimeiry's misguided attempt to forcefully Islamicize the Sudan. This was never meant to be a pardon, but an attempt to try me and my followers under these harsh new so-called Islamic laws. The government released us knowing we'd return to our advocacy for human rights, so as to hold us liable to the prosecution under the newly imposed laws. It was an apparent trap. Exactly 2 weeks after our release, we demanded a repeal of these laws in writing. 5 of us were arrested and found guilty on charges that had nothing to do with our beliefs, stated or otherwise. There was no attempt in the proceedings to show how our conduct rendered us guilty under these offenses, but what we were told was that we could be granted a reprieve if we recanted our religious views. I refused to recant or to even cooperate with this unauthorized court. I adhered to my new understanding of Islam and my complete faith in God's will, to which I was in full submission. I therefore refused to defend myself in this mockery of a court. As my execution was confirmed on January 17, 1985, the remaining Republicans were rounded up and arrested. On January 18th, I was brought up the stairs of a red steel gallows with a dark hood covering my face. As I stood before the crowd, the hood was removed. I looked out and smiled upon the faces of the enraged but still honorable Sudanese people who are still being misled. I smiled knowing that I leave a country on a path towards revolution. A movement committed to implementing Islamic egalitarian and humanitarian values, and my sweet daughters who worked tirelessly to revive the Republican sister and brotherhood. I look forward to the day when the true picture of Islam shines on Muslims and non-Muslims alike, as warm and as bright as the African sun. I was ready to submit to the will of Allah, knowing that I did all I was capable of doing. The hood was replaced, and I was swiftly executed. The next day, the remaining 4 Republicans awaiting their death apparently recanted their beliefs and were released. I'm at peace knowing that I alone took ultimate responsibility for my new understanding of the Quran, and I alone paid the ultimate price, as not one of my devotees was physically harmed. My name is Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, and this is my story. Assalamu alaikum again. My name is Bayadir. Since December 2018, Sudanese people have been protesting against President Omar Bashir's corrupt regime. The International Criminal Court has a warrant for his arrest for the genocide he has led in Darfur. The people have been protesting for almost 6 weeks, and the government has responded with live ammunition, violence, and mass arrests. My poem tonight is dedicated to the 1,000 that are currently detained and the almost 50 martyrs that have died while protesting these past 2 months. Mahmoud Muhammad Taha is a critical historical figure, but not the only story. The Sudanese government continues to suppress the voice of the people through arrests and violence. In order for Sudan to move forward, we need to learn our history and speak truth. My piece is titled Secondhand Smoke. About 54,000 people die from secondhand smoke a year. Some suggest it may be worse than firsthand. I didn't live through wars, but I am the echo of my Sudanese lineage. I did not jump from country to country not knowing where home was, but I do know what smoke does. My family, all 6 of us, were chased out of our country. The government wanted my father dead. His scars are white, symbolizes peace on our flag, but the government has a master's in false propaganda and said Sudan is not in peace, but in 2 pieces. I wasn't raised on fairy tale stories about Cinderella, Rapunzel, and Snow White. I was ignited on biographies of my people, how my father resisted dictators, how my great-grandfather fought imperialism, and how he was friends with the great queen. I was raised to follow my deen. I was raised on what my parents had seen. My parents are my suppliers, addicting me to these stories like nicotine. Who needed to hear about superheroes saving the day and helping the poor when the only thing that saved my family was an American passport? Every room in my home I walk into, I'm engulfed into a thick fog. In my living room, I'm reminded that's where families gather for funerals. I've been to too many. My breath is engulfed, but tears always find a way. I don't know if we cry for the lost soul or the fact Sudan is on fire. Mourning for the soul, but Sudan is dying to them too. Small glinkers in these rooms. You can't quit trauma cold turkey. An American identity can't shield you from the gloom. Whoever walks into my home, we offer them chai, biscuits, a lighter, and an ashtray. They kindle a few cigarettes and leave thick fumes. To the point the blood of Sudanese genocides always fragrance my clothing. I will always be the kid in the room that smells like smoke. Some say I should not write about being a Sudanese refugee because I don't have a first-hand experience. Do they not know? 54,000 people died from secondhand smoke just last year. I no longer blame them for exhaling every eulogy. Smoke is meant to be exhaled eventually.
And now, please welcome Nikohl Boosheri, actress from the Bold type, to read as Iranian journalist Masih Alinejad.
Hello. My name is Masih Alinejad, and this is my story. I'm from a small village in northern Iran called Qomikola Babol. I'm the daughter of poor Iranians who supported the revolution with high expectations that theocracy would fulfill its promises for a better future for them and their children. Those promises were unfulfilled. What did come to fruition, as well as sustain itself under the new regime, was the oppression of me and millions of other Iranian women for the last 40 years. I was 3 years old when the revolution happened, and I cannot remember a day in my childhood when I was not mandated to wear a hijab, both by my family and by the government. I wouldn't even take the scarf off to go to sleep. It was a part of me. It was a part of my body, my identity. It was who I was. If it fell off in the night, I would wake up, blindly find it in the dark, and put it back on before falling asleep again. I felt an anger and a yearning I could not express. My brother was only 2 years older than me, and it seemed as if he could do anything he wanted to. He could bike, he could swim in the river, leave the home, just walk around unveiled. This yearning stayed with and ignited me. By 16, I disobeyed my father and shed the enforced chador, or full-body cloak, and opted for a coat and a simple scarf. When he first saw me like this in the street, he spat on me. At 19, I married a poet who allowed me the freedom to wear stylish clothing and push my scarf back to slightly reveal my hair. He even took photos of me without my scarf on at the beach. This was the first time I really discovered my hair. Autonomy over my own body was a concept so foreign to me that only in the care of another man could I experience the reality of my hair. Big and beautiful, not dangerous or something to be ashamed of, but a part of me. How could the government determine that such a simple freedom was not mine? How could they keep me from this experience for over 20 years? As I reconciled with these questions that had no good answers, I also struggled with fully removing the scarf, even in London, where it's not mandated. Once I overcame my internal battles, I began posting photos of on my social media with my hair showing while I was in London. Women from home said to me, "Masih, don't publish these photos because we envy you." And I knew I was not alone in feeling violated by Iran. Soon after, I was driving through the back roads of my hometown with the windows down and the wind blowing in my hair. I loved this freedom, and it pained me knowing that women in Iran may never experience the same liberation as I. This compelled me to take action. I posted a photo of this and addressed it to Iranian women. I bet you can do the same. Many of them began sending me photos of themselves without a hijab. And this inspired me to start a Facebook page in 2014, My Stealthy Freedom, encouraging women to submit photos of themselves without the hijab while in Iran. The page received immediate attention, reaching 968,000 likes within just 2 years. Iran was not happy with me. The movement was gaining momentum. And at this point, I'd been exiled from my home country, and the government began fabricating lies about me to deter women from participating and to weaken the movement. They said I was on hallucinatory drugs, which is why I removed my scarf. They claimed that I was raped by 3 men in front of my son because I took the scarf off. They aired these blatant and repulsive lies on national television, all in the name of denying women the right to choose. I was worried what my family would think when they heard these lies. My mother called me, crying after the story, and my sister and father no longer speak to me. They disagree with my tactics. Whether they actually disagree or whether they must publicly disagree in order to ensure their safety in Iran, I'm not sure. My father thinks I'm a traitor. And even though my mother never will, he wants her to stop talking to me. And this is hard for me because I still love him, and I hope they will one day come to understand that a woman's freedom to choose is a human right. I hope he will one day be proud of me. At the very least, I am proud of myself. I am a product of the revolution. I wanted to challenge a whole system, and so I started in my own house against my own father. I now live in New York City as a journalist for Voice of America. I've received an award from the Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy. And I've written a New York Times featured memoir. And most importantly, I have the freedom to choose whether or not to cover my hair. And I have far too much hair for it to be covered. a freedom that is currently being fought for by a wide range of women in Iran. The government is scared, and the women are defying bad laws in order to make liberating ones. Here in the West, we must do our part to advocate for these women. They deserve the right to choose, and I have hope that we will get there soon. My name is Masih Alinejad, and this is my story. Thank you.
My name is Isra Al-Ghomgham. I'm 29 years old. I was arrested for protesting during as well as documenting the Arab Spring. I'm expected to be executed.
My name is Samar Badawi. I'm the mother of a 4-year-old daughter. I advocated for women to have the right to vote and the right to drive, one of which has become legal. My husband and brother, both activists, have both been arrested. My relentless activism has also led to my arrest.
My name is Nasima Al-Sada. I'm a well-known activist who has advocated against male guardianship laws. I've been arrested. No one knows why. No one knows where I am.
My name is Nouf Abdulaziz. I am a journalist who has reported on the ongoing arrests of human rights defenders by MBS. My home was raided. I was arrested on no charge. No one knows where I am.
My name is Maya Al-Zahrani. I'm an activist. When my dear friend Nouf was arrested, I shared my sentiments on the social media about the attack on my friend and other fellow activists. I was arrested a few hours later.
My name is Hatun Al-Fassi. I'm 54 years old. I am a writer and a professor who advocated for the right to drive and the right to vote. I was one of the first women to drive once the ban was lifted, and I was arrested a week later.
My name is Noha Al-Balawai. I am a 23-year-old fashion and apparel design student. I supported the right to drive and anti-male guardianship campaigns online. A relative was detained. I went to pick them up. I was arrested and detained. My crime is breaking anti-cybercrime laws.
My name is Naima Al-Matrod. I am 43 years old with poor health due to anemia. I have been sent to 6 years in prison for being involved with the media, online activism, and advocating that the regime release the detained human rights activists. They call this anti-state activity. I will be banned from travel for an additional 6 years after my release, and all communication with my lawyer has been blocked.
My name is Lojan Al-Hatlul. I was originally arrested for attempting to drive across Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirate border, even with my UAE license. I signed a petition advocating against the male guardianship system. I was arrested again. After my release, I was arrested again, along with a few other women and men, including my husband, this time for being involved with women's rights and the driving ban. The ban has been lifted. I have not been released.
My name is Aziza Al-Yusuf. I was involved in a campaign to lift the driving ban and against male guardianship. I was arrested with 6 other people for the crime of expressing skepticism about the Crown Prince's right agenda.
And now, reading an original poetry piece, please welcome India Radfar and Kim Beagle.
that beauty in prison. We thought the authorities were beginning to listen to us. A law even passed that let women drive. Just as we were celebrating the step forward, one by one, we were arrested. Our imprisonment began last year in May. They call us traitors now. Be a witness to our lives.
Sisters, we hear you. Your names are so beautiful to us, but your stories are too painful for words. You showed your greatness to us. You risked your lives for us. Our tears fall.
But does it matter? Will they free us?
I don't know, but we are here for you, waiting and watching at the crossroads on all sides of the border. We need you more than ever.
Today we awake in the same dark place. It is not enough for you to watch and wait in silence. The doors have closed on us. We need you to speak for us. We need you to open them.
It would be an honor to join our voices with yours. You are true reformers, caring more for others than for yourselves. This comes from America, from Los Angeles to be exact, but we have many voices, many faces around the world. For those who have the lives of these 16 women in your hands, we want to tell you that these women are our hearts. They are us at our best and our bravest, and their pain is our pain. We want to tell you that their achievements belong to us. All daughters, sisters, mothers of the world, all sons, brothers, fathers, husbands of the world, not just to the authorities in one country.
Yes, give us our freedom back. And if we are not freed, there will be others who follow us into protest. And how many women can you imprison?
Yes, how many? The good ones and the bad ones, the sisters and the mothers, the wives and the children, all that beauty in prison.
Until we can't see ourselves as prisoners any longer, until our prisons become full of light.
And your streets and homes full of darkness and despair and emptiness that will be witnesses by the entire world.
Is that what you want? Is that what you call equality, progress? Our fathers alone, our brothers alone, our husbands alone, our sons alone. Captors, we know what you are thinking.
But trust us, you're wrong. These women are strong, their voices are loud enough. They have been heard. We know their names, we know their worth. We will not let them disappear.
A tough act to follow. When Ani asked me if I would be part of the closing of tonight's event, she said, do you want us to prepare something or do you want to wing it? And I said, I'm going to wing it. And I wanted to wing it because I knew the stories I would hear tonight, as I do every year, would move me and would touch me in a way I couldn't expect. And you may be wondering, what is this white, middle-aged, gay Episcopalian doing co-chairing the board of a Muslim organization? And that's because I believe in the old American Express motto from 30 years ago: membership has its privileges. All of us in this auditorium tonight have a lot of privileges. Let me give you a very specific example. My godmother, who I adore, Graciela, drove here tonight. If a couple of years ago she had tried to drive in Saudi Arabia, she would have been in prison like these women. We have a level of freedom that we so often take for granted that is simply not available to our brothers and sisters in Muslim communities, both communities, frankly, here in the United States at times, and certainly in Muslim-majority countries. We could choose to simply live in our freedom, or we could choose to use the freedom that we have to fight to make sure that other people enjoy the privileges that we too often take for granted. And I've been very lucky in my life. 31 years ago, I was a high school teacher. A young girl came into my office one day and she said, I want to start a club to fight homophobia. And I said, what do you want to call this club? And she said, I don't know, you're gay and I'm straight. Let's call it a gay-straight alliance. And there are now gay-straight alliances from that one little club in Concord, Massachusetts 31 years ago. There are now gay-straight alliances in over half of American high schools. And that is because a 15-year-old straight girl had the courage to stand up and be an ally to me. All of us in this room have an obligation to stand up and be an ally to people like these Saudi women who we just heard about tonight, who so courageously are risking everything to be able to do something as simple as drive to a party, which all of us did tonight without thinking. I don't know if you noticed when Frej was speaking, but in the bottom left-hand corner, there was an action alert from Amnesty International in 1996 when this kind, mild-mannered, but determined man was in prison in Tunisia for believing that every human being had the right to live freely. I wish I had 1/10 of your courage and strength. And as I was looking at that Amnesty International poster about you, I immediately Googled on my phone a quote by one of my personal heroes, Elie Wiesel. In his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, Mr. Wiesel said, "We must take sides. Sometimes we must interfere. When human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Whenever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe." I firmly believe that the center of the universe, in many ways, is the Islamic world, where basic human rights are in jeopardy. The Islamic world, the second largest religion on planet Earth. The Islamic world, where a tiny organization with 2.5 full-time staff is taking on a regime which has no compunction about murdering people in its own consulate. MPV does all the amazing work you've heard about tonight on a budget of, yes, brace yourself, $336,000 a year. You know, that's not even Melania's weekly wardrobe budget. Yet, MPV has the powers that be running scared. Imagine what we could do if we had twice that much money. I want to thank you for the gifts you made to be here with us today, but I want to challenge you to think about the people you've heard about tonight who are risking everything by standing up for what's right in the face of enormous odds. And to think about, could you give a little more? Could you perhaps buy one of the items for sale out in front, all of the proceeds of which go to benefit our work? Could you tweet or post on Instagram or Facebook or tell friends about this work? All of those actions can make a real difference to a small organization like ours. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being an ally to folks who are standing up for human rights around the world. Thank you for helping us make a difference. And please join me in welcoming our charismatic and brilliant founder, Ani Zonneveld, back to the stage.
Oftentimes, what makes the headlines are negative news. We thought the world would benefit a lot from positive news today, and that's the sort of work that we do. And one that has been making waves in the Arab world has been Tunisian President Essebsi's advocacy for women's rights, more specifically, an initiative for equal inheritance for women and men. Yes, what a novelty. By doing so, the president has taken a strong lead in the Muslim world toward instituting a form of Islam that more accurately reflects the principles of adala, justice, and maslaha, social needs. It is important to protect women and economic disadvantages and empower them to contribute fully in the human, political, social, economic, cultural development of the society, shoulder to shoulder with men. Receiving the word on behalf of President Essebsi is our liaison, Mr. Fenniche. Tunisia has a history of being ahead of its time in abolishing slavery, in women's rights to vote, to abortion, to name a few. Now, is there something different in Tunisia's water?
I don't know, but this question should be asked to the president of Tunisia. I'm not the president of Tunisia,
Yeah,
as
because
you know.
a Tunisian, you
But,
drink some of that water too, actually, he does, you know.
No, I think, let me remember, for example, when the US abolished slavery.
When did we abolish slavery?
1865. 1865. 20 years before, Tunisia abolished slavery. You remember the 13th Amendment of President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. And it was not easy for him to convince the Congress to adopt that amendment. So this is one. Second, the right to vote for women and to be elected was adopted in Tunisia in 1956. Do you know when the US allowed women to vote and to be elected? 1965. This is the Voting Rights Act adopted in the US. In Tunisia, we started in 1956. The polygamy was abolished in Tunisia in 1957. And all these achievements, this is the historical tradition in Tunisia. But more important for me, and in particular for today, because of this law or the possibility to adopt a law on equal inheritance between men and women, this is thanks to the very strong civil society organizations in Tunisia, and in particular, very strong women movement in Tunisia. Thank you.
So, we applaud the exemplary progressive steps Tunisia has taken and wish for other Muslim majority countries to quickly follow suit. With these positive developments in Tunisia, we hope your country be granted consistent political, social, economic stability and prosperity. So I congratulate Tunisia on its initiative of equal inheritance. Please pass it on to the president.